Welcome to With You Podcast,
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And we're coming from outdoors today.
We've been changing it up so much. We created this new studio, and
I've been in it twice.
Yeah, and I don't know. Our life's a little topsy-turvy right now.
So
this one's completely different because we're talking to our computer screen in another state.
Yeah. And we're here together. So last time we were separate. Today we're together in a different state, and we're a little tired because it's been a busy week.
Yeah. So our update is that we have mentioned that we were waiting for a grandchild. The grandchild has arrived. We're grandparents.
So we're feeling old.
Do we look older?
I think we do. So we're looking older, but we're feeling very fortunate, and everybody is healthy and safe, and we're happy about that.
Yeah, we're celebrating, and we'll add some photos to this so you can see our granddaughter.
Oh yeah.
We have a granddaughter who arrived just yesterday, and I had the joy and honor of being present at her labor and birth, which was one of the most exciting moments of my life.
Yeah. And I was just sitting around waiting.
We lost some hours of sleep.
Yep.
For sure. So we are a little tired, but we are so happy and celebrating, and it feels like God's best gift.
I know. It was funny. We did kind of some typical gender roles, because you were at the hospital helping with the birth, and I went to a pub and with a bunch of Eagles fans and watched football
and with the other grandpa,
and then went out to dinner with the other grandpa. So it was really not as exciting for me. The meeting her was amazing, but the process wasn't as exciting.
Well,
but I think that one event can have two very different experiences, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
We are, and we're pivoting in a lot of ways. First of all, recording this very differently, but also our plan today was to talk about play, because this whole season we're toying with the idea of playfulness and pain, and we had some thoughts to talk today about play, but it feels more appropriate today to talk about pain.
Yeah.
So
I think pain is a better topic because it's been a little bit closer to us this past week.
Yeah. So we're gonna just introduce this whole idea of pain, and we both feel really close to this idea because in our professions we both walk with people through a lot of pain. So we have, of course, experienced it in our own lives, and we've helped other people journey through pain. So
yeah, and as a grad school professor, I cause pain.
Yeah.
So we cover all the angles. So
you kind of lean into that, don't you?
We help, but we also cause some pain, because not all pain is bad.
Yeah, and that's what we want to play with too, is the idea of the purpose of pain in our lives, because pain is inevitable.
Yep.
In the human experience. So it's something everybody should be able to relate to in some way. And it's something we don't love talking about. So we'll talk about avoidance.
Yep.
Hello, avoidance.
Hi.
Me too.
So this is a real background. It looks it looks fake, but here, let me just move so you can kind of see. Yeah, this is what it looks like in Kentucky.
And this is also at an apartment of a friend who was generous to let us stay here as we awaited our grandchild's arrival. So
and for their privacy, we decided not to film inside
of their apartment.
So we're out on the patio. So you might hear trains, you might hear planes, and that's how we avoid talking about pain.
I know, we're avoiding it now.
We're not even
going there yet.
Good model.
Yeah. So why are we talking about?
Why are we talking about pain? Because I think pain is necessary. There's purposeful pain. I think a lot of times, especially in the U.S., but I think globally, we organize our life around avoiding pain. I mean, if you I just watched the Lions play a Monday Night Football game, and for 50 years they've caused pain in my life. They found unique ways, and now they're winning, and I don't know what to do. But
some of even fun for you anymore if they're winning.
No, it's kind of like, oh, how do I accept success? And I'm so used to the pain. But I think one of the things I noticed, a lot of the commercials are about medication to avoid pain.
I was just thinking that, and we didn't talk about this, but
No,
whenever you say avoiding pain, I think of this commercial I remember from ages ago that had this jingle, and maybe it's a song recorded by an artist too, but I haven't got time for the pain,
yeah,
haven't got room for the pain. That song?
yeah, but
Yeah, because we don't have time for pain.
what's the brand that it's selling?
It was like, Tylenol or something like that. I don't remember. I remember the song.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, I don't have time for it. I don't have space for it. I want to avoid it. And we see that any type of discomfort we're trying to get rid of, we either avoid it or we medicate it, and so I think talking about pain that maybe has a slightly different focus, that this idea of purposeful pain, or what we
Yeah.
talk about in development is optimal frustration.
Yeah.
That a little bit of frustration actually causes growth to happen. Too much and it's paralyzing. And I think pain's kind of the same process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I want to talk about pain. Why do you want to talk about pain?
Well, because I spent most of my life avoiding it. And
That's fair.
I later in life, I've found room to accept that it is inevitable and that fighting it makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's something I've learned the hard way. And I think it's a good thing to talk about, because it's the first step in avoidance is turning around and facing it, right?
Yeah. And that can be personal pain. It can be emotional, physical,
Yeah.
or relational.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask too, like what people think of when I talk about childbirth pain in my classes. I bring up, what are some words that come to mind when you think about birth, but also what are some things we think of as pain? What are some common things that in the human experience we see as painful? And
Yeah.
I'd say, the first thing people think of is a physical injury. If you break your leg or you have an accident or you
Yep.
burn yourself on a hot stove or, that physical injury to your body.
Yeah.
What else do you think of?
I think, well, given that we've been talking about birth in our own personal life and kind of thinking about our own birth process, I think watching someone in pain that you care about, so kind of vicarious pain,
Vicarious.
it's really hard to see. Like when you were having the kids, it felt very inadequate. Going, would you like ice chips? And you had to kind of focus and get into a space, and there was nothing I can do. And
Yeah.
so kind of being that vicarious observer of difficult, painful things, I think about that. I think about trauma of really horrible experiences, whether it's war or different
So you're
types.
thinking about a lot of helplessness kind of stuff, which
Well, that's what I deal with all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when I think about pain, I think
So-
about the relational damage.
You're also thinking of emotional pain.
Yep.
Because we talked about physical, like harm to your body, and there's also emotional pain of watching somebody else be hurt
Yeah.
or a loss or broken relationship.
Yeah.
People think of those types of things as pain also, even though it's not a physical sensation necessarily.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, the kind of pain and love go together in a not in a weird way.
Careful now.
Yeah. It's that if I love you deeply, then there's this potential for hurt. There's this potential for pain. But when we're talking about this, I think it probably is good if we start with our own kind of what jumps to our own minds. That
Yeah.
sets off the alarm bells for us. I just hear the fire.
Oh, we got a siren in the background.
Yeah.
How appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So what does everybody think of as their own experience that they've had with pain? And the first thing I think of is, the childbirth pain. I remember that. I remember some physical injuries I've had, breaking an arm. I remember the sensation of, when I think of some of the most physical pain I've had, I had a time that probably was a concussion. I remember sitting on this chain fence once swinging, and I fell backwards onto concrete, like onto the back of my head.
Mhm.
And I can remember that sensation. It's hard to describe, but it was like this buzzing and just pain through my whole body. And yeah, so that's the first physical things that pop up. I've had a few injuries in my life, but nothing catastrophic.
I have two really good stories.
Okay, tell us your good pain story.
So I played high school football, and so you just this wasn't the
head,
story.
yeah.
This wasn't the story I was going to tell, but yeah, the head pain. So we were playing the number one team in the state of Michigan, and we shouldn't have been on the same field because we were not good. But we went to play this team, and I was the quarterback and I got hit a lot. And this one time we were running the option. I was coming around the left end, and Willie Wilson, I still remember.
Oh, no. Hi, Willie.
Hi, Willie. I hope you're doing well. He came around. He was a middle linebacker, probably 6'2", 230 pounds in high school. Came around the corner, hit me so hard, I was looking out my ear hole. So the helmet went sideways, and I don't remember. The only thing I remember was getting up and then someone taking me, my center, pulled me from the wrong huddle, back to our huddle.
So you don't remember the pain?
Well, I remember the aftermath of it, but my body shut down. So I played the rest of that half, and I have pictures in the newspaper of me playing. No recollection of any of it until the next day when I had that. So it happened. I didn't have any realization of it, and then I felt it later. And I think sometimes we don't realize what's been painful or damaging until later. The second story of pain that I remember was when I was water skiing with my buddy Andy. And I tried doing a trick on a knee board, and the knee board hit me straight in the face and kind of cracked my face open a bit. And that was really, really bad pain. But I had to navigate it because Andy was afraid of blood and passed out. And so he was driving the boat, and I needed him not to pass out driving the boat so I could get back in the boat. So those are the two stories I think about when I think about
I guess
pain.
my worst pain, when you talk about injuries, we all think of our own. My other worst physical pain was I got badly burned by hot oil when I was 10. I picked up a cup that had burning oil that was used for cooking, and I spilled it on myself, and I was burned really quite severely. And I don't remember the pain of when it happened. Because I think your body does shut off some of that stuff when it's severe.
Their survival.
The most painful part was peeling off of the bandages to like the burns. And that because you were anticipating it. And I think we talked about anticipatory pain, like something bad's coming and your body's on alert, and so it makes it worse. And so that was pretty bad. And other types of pain too, as you talked about. I was thinking about referred pain. Like there's referred pain that sometimes
that you give to someone else.
Well, that's what you were talking about. And the pain of watching somebody else suffer, and that's an emotional sensation. But referred physical pain is when you're feeling an actual sensation, but not at the source of the injury. So that's interesting. And there's acute pain, which is like right when something happens, and there's chronic pain that just is long-lasting, long-term
interesting
pain in your life.
We didn't really talk much about this beforehand. So when you talk about referred pain, I think about a clinical case I was working with where someone was having seizures. And it wasn't because of any neurobiological cause. It was about emotional cause that led to the symptoms. So the symptoms were real. The pain was real. But the reason was kind of referred. So the pain was in a place that was okay to have pain in, where the cause of it was something completely different.
I mean, that's the thing about not talking about this beforehand, because we could go completely on, we could fill a whole episode just with the idea of the mind, body, spirit connection, and how that's all entwined in what is pain. It's not it's not that easily defined as a physical sensation in response to an injury.
Well, and even our bodies in relationship I think of when you were pregnant, there's a French term called Couvade syndrome, where I felt things.
You had the symptoms, but I think you just wanted to have the craving.
No.
You could eat the donut because I didn't want them.
Or there's I don't think that was it.
It was nice of you to feel some sympathy
Because I
for me.
think the emotional connection, if you think about when we're really connected with someone, there's things called, mirror neurons. And so there is this ability to have experiences for each other because you're connected. We tend to only think of body as my body rather than my body, your body, our space
Our shared
together.
experience. Yeah,
And that's very systemic. I mean, I
it
get to
is very
teach. I love
systemic.
that. I get to teach about that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So because we're talking about pain as more than just like what do we do it or how do we fix it?
yeah,
Um, we just want to talk about what can be the function of pain in our lives, like the
yeah.
purpose of pain. Can it be purposeful? Is there a function to pain, acute pain, chronic pain? I mean, I know but
Yeah.
it's a hard question, but I think the main function, the main purpose of the physical sensation of pain, if you hurt your hand,
Yeah.
is to send a warning signal to your
Yep.
brain that
Yep.
there's something that we
Something's
need,
amiss.
something's wrong.
Yep.
There's a threat
Yep.
to my wellness
Yep.
that needs to be dealt with. And emotionally, I'm sure there's a similar function to
Yeah.
that pain. It's an alert that something's missing or wrong or needs to be tended to.
Well, that's the fight, flight, freeze experience that we have with
Mhm.
the kind of limbic system. It perceives, is there something wrong? Is there something going to be threatening to my
Yeah.
survival? And it started out physical survival, but it becomes relational. Like if I'm sensitive towards being alone,
Mhm.
and then you pull away, that can be a signal, a painful signal of, oh, you're going to abandon me. Now, that's not the cognitive or the relational truth, but that's the physical experience that I have that
Mhm.
leads me to, if I'm not aware of that pain is telling me something about connection and what I need, I can react and it can cause lots and lots of problems relationally.
Yeah.
So the warning, I
Or
like that
warning or
idea.
prompt.
Yeah,
Warning
and
sounds scary too, so even just a prompt
a prompt
that
or a heads
something
up.
yeah, that something is different
Yeah.
or needs to be dealt with.
Well, we often talk about like putting your hand on a stove. If you don't have the sensation in your nerves, if you don't have that feedback, it can actually do big damage.
Yeah.
And so it's a warning in terms of something needs to change.
Yeah.
And that's one purpose of pain is that, oh, something needs to change or something is happening here and we need to attend it so that it doesn't do deeper damage.
Right.
And so if in relationship we're pursuing and pulling back, how do we see that as not, oh, what we're doing to each other, but oh, we need to dance differently. And so how are we informed by it? I think that's what I think about as purposeful pain. I think there's pain that we do unintentionally and intentionally that is just wrong in relationship too. So I don't want people to take away all pain is purposeful.
No.
I think it's
Or
all pain is information,
I'll pay as information. Yeah.
but it's not necessarily purposeful. It can be there's
Well, it's
something
not
wrong.
always beneficial.
No,
By purposeful, we don't mean pain is always beneficial.
right. No. And some situations it means you need to get out of that situation. I mean, like take your hand off the stove, get out of that situation. How do you then interact with the stove in healthier ways? How do you interact relationally in healthier ways? How do you navigate birth?
Mhm.
In healthy way, because birth is pain and it's purposeful. It's how you approach it, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's a tricky thing because in birth, it's a body function that's happening and a lot of the pain is functional pain of just it's nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
It's just a sensation of a lot of intense things happening inside your body, muscular work. But there's also sometimes where things are going wrong and there's a pain that does need to be attended to. If there's something that's not right with the way it's progressing or there's something that's not right with your body, there's pain that is a warning sign that
Mhm.
something needs to be changed or you need to get to more help.
But there's also the pain that's working, right?
Yeah.
Like
There's just pain and
just
working.
thinking about contractions. Contractions are work and they're painful,
Yeah.
but they're purposeful.
Yeah.
They're doing
So it's
something.
just like
I
when I
loved how you
take,
told me about how it's like how can you just talk a little bit about that?
we don't want to go too deep
I
into
love it because
the
it was
physiology.
fascinating to me of
Yeah.
how the uterus contraction actually does a lot of work. It's not just because you see like on TV
Yeah.
women in birth and they're just screaming, losing their ever loving mind.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're being murdered.
Yeah. And
And
that's what we're conditioned to think, that it's torture.
yeah.
And so and we'll get into that when we talk about the difference between pain and suffering.
Okay.
That's fascinating too. But you really want me to talk
Yeah,
about?
I do. I mean we were talking last night and it was just
Yeah.
fascinating to me of that the contractions are actually doing things structurally
Yeah.
that
Well, this is a key thing that I think is helpful in people coping with any kind of pain in birth. I can talk about specifically to birth because this is what
yeah,
it's what I get into, and
and then I'll generalize it to relationships.
there we go.
All right.
This is the way. This is our dance. So in birth, it helps to deal with and cope with the sensations of birth when you understand what's happening. The same way I hated watching baseball until you explained what was
Oh,
happening.
good. I was just like going to have a heart attack. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't grow up with baseball. So when one of our first dates, you made me keep box score, which was painful.
Yes. Yes. Well, it was a new experience.
Uncomfortable. It
Yes.
was hard, but it helped me in the long run much more enjoy going to baseball games with you because it didn't look like just I didn't know what was happening on the field. When you understand it, it's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. It's not as boring.
Not saying birth is necessarily enjoyable, but understanding what's happening helps you interpret the sensation differently, right? So,
yeah,
in birth, because all the pictures and the scenes we see of birth look like torture, and we're told from other people who've gone through it, you just have to survive, basically.
Yeah.
That's, the best you can hope for is just survival. When you understand that it's a muscular work that's happening inside your body and that each of those sensations is those muscles pulling up and over to release the baby to get to the end, it's more like running an endurance race.
Yeah.
That doesn't look like fun either.
No.
It causes a lot of
I don't want to do I don't want to do either. I don't want to have a baby and I don't want to run endurance race.
Oh, you ran the Spartan with me,
Well, yeah.
and like you feel good at the end, and you work your body in certain ways, and
I had a good
we had this
relational time. Yeah,
conversation
I had a
before.
good relational time. I don't know
Yeah,
about feel
yeah.
good.
But it helps to understand in anything that we're doing that's that's athletic or what the function of that is in our body, to understand that there's a purpose for this, and in the end, this is gonna get this result. And so that helps our brain interpret the sensation differently, which has an effect on how we feel.
Well, and
pain.
how we respond to it, right? If that muscle is contracting for a purpose, then I can value that experience. It doesn't mean I have to like it or it gives me pleasure, but it's like, oh, that's working, and I
And
can
you don't
lean
get
in.
in the same fight or flight
Right.
response. The fear, we talk about the fear, tension, pain cycle a lot.
Yep.
So if you have fear, your body responds with tension because you're gonna run away from something or you're gonna fight it.
Yep.
And then when you build tension in your body, the pain feels more intense. And then when the pain increases, we have more fear of the pain coming, and you get in that cycle, and it's much harder to get out of that.
And that's where, so that birth feedback loop with pain, that cycle happens in relationships. So if anybody is like, I've never been pregnant, I don't ever plan to be pregnant, which is me. But that cycle makes sense of like, if we're having conflict, and it stresses me out and I feel like you're doing something to me, then I'm going to avoid, I'm going to fight, I'm going to get tense. It's going to amp up. I'm going to say things that are hurtful, and we're going to have a cycle of more and more pain rather than, oh, that's information. And how can I appreciate what that information is, how we're doing the dance and do it differently? Then the pain becomes information that I can do something different versus information that's going to lead to avoidance or fighting or cut off. And so this mechanism that I think is so beautiful in the birth process is really helpful for us in relationships, in running companies, in dealing in churches, I mean, it's a consistent message across a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
And it's why we wanted to talk about
I know,
this.
because we do very different things, but what we do in our work has this in common is understanding the purpose of painful things and
Yeah.
how we can use that for growth instead of getting stuck. Right. And so, like, common responses to pain for most people, we talked a lot in the beginning just about avoidance. I
Yeah.
think that's the common, none of us wants pain, but there is like the far end of the spectrum of people seeking pain,
Yeah,
which is also obviously unhealthy,
it's a
but
problem.
it can be a way of avoiding something else by
Yeah.
seeking pain or
It's a substitute.
a substitute for something else. So that's one end of the spectrum. There's, embracing or accepting pain as
Yeah.
just part of life, which I've seen in some other cultures because they have a different interpretation of pain or it's just more common.
Oh, and I think that acceptance is there can be a physiological response. So kind of a really good takeaway for both of ours. So starting for me, when I was first doing therapy, when I was first working with couples, there was lots of pain in the room, lots of wounding, and it would get me really, really activated. And you gave me a Fitbit, and I worked on embracing the moment of like, how do I sit here with people and slow down my heart rate, slow down my breathing to be present and not reactive to the momentary pain in the room. Because if I got reactive, it would just tumble out of control. I think that's the same thing you talk with
So
men
maybe that's
about.
the idea of embracing is not saying, great, bring it on. Like, I love pain. It's just saying, I know it's going to happen. So how do I regulate my response to it, knowing that it's
Yeah.
going to be present?
Yep.
Right. So that's part of like understanding pain. I think that what we can aspire to, what's aspirational is learning from it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, my experiences of loss, like we had a couple of miscarriages that were painful emotionally. And the thing that nobody wants that or to say that that was useful in any way in their life. But for me, what was valuable about going through that myself was the learning to understand how to be helpful to somebody else
Yeah.
in pain and loss. And that was a great value I took from that because I have much deeper empathy for other people going through loss because I had that experience.
Yeah. I think both of us, that's really helpful. There's a lot of noise out here.
I hope we can reduce some of that
Yeah.
this for you later. We've got lawnmowers and birds.
And dogs.
Lovely.
So we are trying to lean into the discomfort and stay present with you. So I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of end on talking about the difference between pain and suffering. So we've been talking about pain that's purposeful. We've been talking about how we lean into it, how we don't try to avoid, but embrace, not like an enjoyable, but understanding, responding, learning from.
Yeah.
But then what's this idea of suffering?
Yeah. So we talk about this in birth too, because, some people, you can have people that have a very similar experience from the outside. It looks like the same things happened
Yeah.
to them in a birth. And some people might describe it as the best day of their lives, and some people might feel traumatized by it.
Mm.
And I think one way to understand why that is because pain, the definition of pain is just the sensation that just happens. You can't really control that. Like
Yeah.
the physical sensation that happens in our body when we feel pain, which is all experienced in the brain. Actually, if I feel pain in my hand, the pain isn't actually happening there. It's happening in my brain, which tells us we have some control over that interpretation of it. And that's the difference. So pain is the physical sensation. Suffering is our response or our interpretation of the pain. So it's more of the emotional response, has to do with feeling helpless, fearful, having panic, loss of control, aloneness.
Yeah.
And I think the next step on the continuum is trauma.
Yeah.
And trauma usually comes from that loss of control. So the suffering, is something that's possibly more avoidable than pain.
Yeah.
Because we can prevent that with our interpretation of what's happening.
I think some suffering is. I think when we get to the trauma side where we're thinking about war or we're thinking about relational violations that are abusive, that's a whole different neurological experience
Yeah.
as well as suffering. But I think suffering, I mean, theologically, I struggled with this a lot because we talk about in the Christian faith, we have a suffering savior. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we talk about the suffering being on account of sin. I tend to think the suffering is because of love, that there is something wrong, and I'm going to enter into this because I love so much. And so
But
that
explain that
there's,
more, because that could be misinterpreted.
yeah. So I think we have a God who loves us so much that the potential for suffering exists in perfection. It's not necessarily just a problem, but it's to love means the potential to have pain. Because we care so much and God loves us and we turn away, that leads to a sense of painful experience. Suffering isn't the hopelessness. And so this is where I struggle a little bit with the hopeless idea. I think it's an interpretation of, yes, if it's because something we've done and it's a consequence, there's suffering. But I think there's also a different type of suffering, and maybe we need a different word for it.
Yeah.
But it's because we love, and that I care so much about you. There's a potential. Now, does fear amp that up into a different level, or can I live in that tension of I care and I realize bad things can happen?
Yeah.
And having to live in that space, which I think is a divine space, and it helps us respond to pain differently than just the idea of it's hopeless, it's helpless. It's like, oh, it's because I care. Part of this comes because I care.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about emotional pain, because I'm thinking you're thinking from your relational work, and I'm
Yep.
thinking more from a physical perspective of childbirth pain and chronic pain, which I think is more likely to lead to suffering, because it's there's nothing I can do to make this go away.
Yeah.
Which leads to more of the suffering, because we have a response to feeling like, well, I'm out of control. I can't fix this. I don't really see any purpose for this in my life. And I think that's more how we define suffering, of like, I can't do anything to change this, and it's causing a lot of trouble in my life.
Yeah, and I see that, and the meaninglessness is kind of, you can have an experience with the hopeless, meaningless, that leans into the traditional kind of suffering. With meaning, it's purposeful pain. And then trauma is things that happens outside of our control, that because of that, it's such a big thing that we're in a powerless position when we experience it. That's what trauma is. And we can get into the neurobiology, but I don't think that's what we want to do today.
No, we just wanted to lean into the idea of the possibility that pain has something to teach us.
Yeah. And to remove fear from it. I think we get messages of you should avoid it, right? The constant, right, across the board. There's no gray area of we should avoid pain at all costs or fight against it. And I think there's much more nuanced of, it can be helpful. It can be something that's unpleasant, but can foster growth.
Well, wouldn't you say too that the way our efforts to protect ourselves from pain can lead to more pain?
Yeah. Have you ever made, like, to avoid something, made really bad decisions and it just got worse?
Yeah.
We would tell the kids that, of like, if you've done something wrong, fess up to it, because the lying and the covering up is going to be more problematic, because that breaks trust. And so, yeah, we all do things that are wrong and make mistakes, and there's going to be consequences, but that's so much better than the stupid things we do to cover it up. And
to avoid painful consequences.
Most sports are that way. The first person to do something wrong never gets caught. It's the reaction that ends up getting a flag in football. And so the reaction, it comes back to the Lions, and they had a lot of penalties last night. So, but they won. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So when you respond differently to pain, it might be like, oh, this is a whole new area. It's awkward and I don't know what to do. there's talk with people about it, kind of do it in relationship. I think that's where the strength comes in when you're doing couples working in the birth process. It's the birthing mother with a support person that all of a sudden shifts, whether it's a doula, their partner, a medical staff.
That's a good point that we should have really, we didn't even think about adding this as our final point, but all pain can be relieved by support.
Yes.
And
Preach,
that is
sister.
scientific.
Yes.
They've shown that even just physical touch reduces the sensation of physical pain. And knowing that somebody's with you, somebody's witnessing it, somebody's beside you, reduces
we're carrying
pain
it together
and reduces the chance of suffering.
Yeah.
And that's our whole core
belief
idea, that we're supposed to be in this together. We're supposed to find the people that can help us. Sometimes it's a stranger, even in a hospital, of just somebody who says, I see you, I'm with you. Can reduce the sensation of suffering and the potential for trauma.
And I think look for opportunities to be with each other. So I know you make fun of me, but even like last night when I came to visit at the hospital, me and the security guard spent a good 20 minutes talking about fishing in the whole Ohio River, and he caught a turtle and a couple of catfish, and we had a lovely time. And then there was a smile on his face this morning when I saw him again. That the relational experience it can be a little thing, but do we see each other? That can alleviate some of the perceived threat that exists in relationships. So this has been fun. I mean, it's painful. This didn't go the way we wanted it to. We miss our studio. Life is full of little disappointments. That's the Van Dyke theme.
That is one of your life mottos.
It is. And, my Central and Eastern European friends know what I'm talking about. Life's full of little disappointments. And that means, I kind of expect that. I can respond to it rather than I think I'm entitled to everything going my way. And when it doesn't, it ruins my day.
And it's really more upsetting and more painful when you expect the best all the time.
Like I say, baseball is a metaphor for life. If you don't have short-term memory as a ball player, you will not be happy, because as a batter, if you do 3 out of 10 times something really, really good, you're a Hall of Famer. That means you're failing 70% of the time. And if you hold on to that, the game's going to be miserable. And so you have to kind of realize, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes and I'm going to learn from them and set them aside and keep playing. And so we want you to realize you're going to have some pain. There's people to be in it with you. And if not, give us an email or contact us through all the places you listen to the podcast, and we'll respond. I had someone was really funny. They were listening to our podcast on cicadas, and they reached out and said, how do you do this? Like the comment was really like, how can you make a podcast on this? No, really, how can you? Because it's so loud. I couldn't even think. It was really funny. And so I got to respond to that person. If you're suffering, if you're in pain, if you're alone, reach out. We'd like to kind of have a distant conversation on a social media platform. So, I mean, not too much intimacy, but a little bit. So
we're glad you're with us, and we hope you keep listening.
See you soon.